All right, so good evening, everyone. I wish you a very warm welcome to this webinar on how businesses can get themselves ready with card on file tokenization. My name is Siddhesh Desai, and I work as a product manager with Cashfree Payments. I'm looking forward to hosting this webinar session with all of you today. So today's webinar is a follow-up to the previous session that we had on card tokenization 101, wherein we try to demystify the concept of card on file tokenization and its impact on the merchants. Today's focus will be more on the recent developments on card on file tokenization guidelines and how merchants can get themselves ready, right? So card on file tokenization, if you see, is a bold yet necessary step taken by RBI in order to improve the security and privacy of customer card information. Ever since the release of these guidelines, which was back in 2019, RBI has been constantly monitoring the industry-wide progress on card-on-file tokenization and has been very considerate in offering deadline extensions in order to ensure a smooth transition to the new card payment flows. RBI has also made a few amendments during the course to the original circular based on the feedback received from the industry. While the multiple amendments and deadline extensions might create some confusion among the merchants, much of the heavy lifting required for being compliant with the guideline is expected to be done by the payment gateways and payment aggregators like Cashfree. So now the revised deadline for being compliant with this RBI circular is 30th September, which again comes up with some additional asks pertaining to the guest checkout flow. We will try to cover these guidelines in details from our panelists. So without taking much of your time, let me introduce the panelists for our today's webinar. Joining us today is Shantanu Shirke. He is the Director of Products at Mastercard. Shantanu is responsible for driving card-on-file tokenization as well as wallet products at Mastercard. Previously, Shantanu has worked with NPCI and IndusInd Bank to drive various payment initiatives. Thanks for joining us, Shantanu.
Thank you, Siddhesh.
Next, we have Siddharth Phukan. He is a Director of Enterprise Strategy and Growth at Cashfree Payments. He has been one of the early employees at Cashfree Payments and is a witness and a key contributor to the growth of Cashfree Payments. Welcome, Siddharth.
Thanks, Siddhesh. Good afternoon, everyone.
All right, so we'll start with the session. So my first question is to you, Siddharth. Can you brief us about the RBI guideline and how important is it for merchants to comply?
Sure. Thanks, Siddhesh, for the question. So just a brief, right? So we all know that how digital payments have increased, right? The number of payments, the volume as such. And one of the key aspects, as Siddhesh also mentioned, is the security, right? So earlier what used to happen is that PCI DSS players such as payment aggregators as well as merchants were allowed to save the 16-digit card number, right? But in order to make it more secure and compliant, we have gone live with tokenization, which basically says that only the networks and issuing banks would be able to save the card details, right? So how does the merchant then track or do the reconciliation? That is where the tokenization comes into the picture. Right? So instead of the card number, basically the token would be used. And from a business perspective, speaking about that, all these new features need to be implemented, right? And that is where the payment ecosystems such as Cashfree comes into the picture and helps to be compliant as well as to pass on the benefit, right? One of the very important factors is in today's world is the customer experience, right? So how to ensure that the end customer experience remains the same or maybe becomes better, but at the same time also balance it out from a security perspective. So yes, Siddhesh, that's my opening statement on the question.
Thanks for the answer, Siddharth. My next question is to you, Shantanu. So can you tell us about the recent RBI mandate on guest checkout flow of card payments and how does that affect our merchants and the customers?
Sure, Siddhesh. So RBI in its circular, which was shared last year, had given a deadline of 31st of December to comply with card on file tokenization, and there was an extension to that. But in that extension, the regulator had categorically mentioned that other flows, apart from card on file, should also be secured or tokenized. And a follow-up to that, I think we got multiple extension in the month of March and then in June. And the recent one, which the recent mandate which was shared by RBI, give references to the guest checkout. So what RBI is tried to say through this mandate or the circular is that the original card on file tokenization will have a deadline, or compliance will have a deadline of end of September. And from 1st of October, all those card on files which are there with the merchant will have to be moved to tokens. So all those card on files will be moved to tokens. Apart from that, RBI tried to give some explanation or on the guest checkout that merchants who are allowing guest checkout, they can hold the PAN number or the customer details for T+4 days or until the settlement has happened, whichever is earlier. Further, they also stated that the acquiring processor or the acquiring entity can hold the customer information till end of January. So from 1st of January, the regulator expects that the entire market, including card on file and guest checkout, will move to the tokenization flow. So that's the expectation from the regulator. And this also means that we still have to adhere to the COF guidelines. That is, the merchant will have to purge the PAN information after 30th September. At the same time, the rest of the industry will have to comply with other flows which are there in the market, that be be it EMI, be it offers, or in that case recurring payments also. So that's the take that or things which can be inferred from the recent RBI circular.
Got it. Thanks, Shantanu. I think by now our audience understands the RBI guideline to some extent. Would also request everyone to note down their questions and ask them in the Q&A box so that we will get them answered by the end of this session. Right. Now let's try to start with a poll question for our audience. So the question would appear on the screen for around 30 seconds and you can try answering it. I think the question would have appeared on your screens. You can try answering it. So far, I think 26 of 50 participants have answered it. I will wait for another 30 seconds so that everyone can answer. All right. Thank you everyone for answering. We will release the results at the end of this session. I mean, before we start the Q&A. Now let's, one of the first questions which merchant asks us is what are the essential things that a merchant needs to do in order to be ready with tokenization. Right. This is one of the very frequently asked questions, you can say, when it comes to card on file tokenization. Right. I would like to break this into two parts. One is for merchants who are not offering safeguard as a feature, but they are accepting card payments from their customers. And second is where merchants are offering the safeguard feature. So if you take the first case, wherein merchants are not offering safeguard feature, but are accepting plain card payments, then they need to ensure the following things. First is that they need to ensure is that they do not store the plain card numbers and only anything apart from the last 4 digits, right? And that should be done only for display purposes to the customer so that they are able to identify which card they are trying to make a payment through. For any of the other downstream processes, like let's say refunds, etc., they can make use of a common reference ID like transaction ID or order ID, right? Second thing that they need to ensure is they have to purge all the card data that they have stored so far for all the old transactions, right? And maybe they can replace it with last 4 digits of the card number so that they can use it to display other details to the customer, right? Now let's come to the second case wherein merchants are offering a safeguard feature. Then they need to ensure the following things additionally. First is that they have to implement card-on-file tokenization solution by integrating with a token requester, token service provider, or a payment aggregator like Cashfree, or maybe they can directly integrate with the networks and be a token requester themselves. This they need to do in order to provision tokens as well as to process tokens, which is basically processing safeguard transactions, right? Additionally, they also need to ensure that whatever card numbers that they had stored earlier, now in this case, merchants would have probably saved 16-digit plain card numbers on their server. Now they'll have to delete these card numbers and take a fresh consent from their customers and tokenize these cards to offer the plain safeguard feature to their customers. Siddharth, would you like to add anything here?
Yes, so just to add another point, right? So whenever there's a change, right, there are questions as to how would the ad hoc features such as settlement, refunds, chargebacks be done, right? Because essentially the card or a part of the card number was used, right? So there again, so to make things simple, the payment aggregators such as Cashfree would take the ownership and handle all these complex, business critical functions, and we'll ensure that the smoothness, remains as such, even with the migration from the card to the tokenized layer.
In the end, we talked about merchants integrating with a token requester and token service provider or a payment aggregator to implement card-on-file tokenization. Now, allow me to elaborate on how Cashfree Payments has come up with a range of product solutions which merchants can pick up from to implement card-on-file tokenization, right? So we, from the beginning, knew that a one-size-fits-all kind of a solution would not be compatible for all our merchants, because each merchant has a different use case, has a different scale of business, and they have a different perspective at looking at how plain card or safeguard payments would help scale their business, right? So in order to, by understanding all these merchant requirements, we came up with 3 different kinds of product offerings. First one was a no-code integration for Cashfree hosted checkout page. What I mean by that is, Cashfree has a Cashfree hosted checkout page, which can be used by our merchants to accept all kinds of payments, be it UPI, cards, wallets, etc. Now the UI of this payment page is completely controlled by Cashfree, right? In this case, the integration required for offering different payment options versus the integration required for offering safeguard feature via tokenization, there is no difference at all. So if they just integrate our payment gateway, they would be able to offer tokenization as a solution without any additional efforts, which is why we call it as a no-code integration for Cashfree hosted checkout page, right? All the requirements related to complying with the RBI guideline, like only displaying the last 4 digits of the card number to the customer and not the first 6 digits or anything apart from that. Tokenizing the card after taking the consent from the customer by integrating with relevant networks, as well as offering the option to delete the cards if the customer wants to. These are all taken care by Cashfree through our hosted checkout page, right? Second is a slightly advanced solution, which is an API integration for merchant customized checkout page. So this is a solution which allows merchants to build their own UI for accepting different kinds of payments. Many of our merchants are already live on it. In tokenization, they have to additionally implement few APIs so that they are able to maintain their own database of tokenized and tokenized cards. And they can also take care of displaying these cards to their customers by through a unique customer identifier, right? Now in this case, what happens is, if the consent has been given to Cashfree to tokenize the card, the card would be tokenized through Cashfree, and we will pass on the details, the safeguard details, in an RBI compliant manner to our merchants. Right? If they want to make a subsequent payment for these tokenized cards, they will have to use a simple identifier like an instrument ID to process payments through Cashfree. Right? This is how it will work. The third integration or the third product that we offer is slightly advanced, and it offers an interoperable feature. Allow me some time to explain it. So the third integration is API integration to allow token payment processing across multiple payment aggregators. So in terms of API implementation, it seems very similar to the second product offering, but it comes up with additional features wherein, say for example, the customer had given a consent to merchant A to tokenize a card and they were using Cashfree's payment gateway, then the card would get tokenized through Cashfree. But in the subsequent payments, when the customer has selected a card that has been tokenized through Cashfree, they need not always process payments through Cashfree. They can always choose a payment aggregator apart from Cashfree to process these payments. How it works is, the networks like Visa, Mastercard, RuPay, even American Express and Diners have offered us a cryptogram API. What we do is, whenever a merchant requests to make a payment through this card, they can always call a cryptogram API or request a cryptogram through us, and we will give them details like token number, token expiry, and cryptogram. They can use these details and pass on these details to different payment aggregators and payment processors to get the transaction process. So this is what we mean by interoperability. The cards can be stored through Cashfree, but the processing of these tokenized cards can be done through anywhere. It could be done through Cashfree or any other payment aggregator of the merchant's choice. They can build a dynamic routing algorithm logic to improve their success rates, etc., by using the third product offering that we have. Right? So my next question is to you, Shantanu. Can you give us a bird's eye view of card market landscape in our country, and what is Mastercard's role and how the market will evolve post tokenization?
Sure, Siddhesh. I think in totality, if you look with few of the networks, who are right now, gearing up for tokenization, there were around 250 million tokens which are created, covering around 60 to 70% of the cardholder base in the Indian market. We as a Mastercard have reached and onboarded more than 2 lakh merchants. So 45,000 small merchants who are, further engaged with their partners. Around 34 issuers have been onboarded on the tokenization MDES platform. There are 10 acquiring banks who have been onboarded, and 30 plus token requesters. So in a nutshell, I think while the industry is first trying to adopt the COF mandate, which is the deadline is by the end of this month, the industry is also working on building other use cases of loyalty, EMI. Further, these volumes will further ramp up as merchant community will tokenize cards which are set for recurring payment with the e-mandates which are there in the market. And I'm sure with better clarity on use cases like travel, hotel industry, there will be further push on the tokenization product. But overall, this looks very positive. The industry is moving, slowly catching up and moving towards entire tokenization of the card base by end of the month.
Got it. I think even Cashfree has been live on this token requesting, token provisioning piece with different networks, right? We have been observing a significant improvement in the success rates when it comes to token provisioning or token requesting. So the current success rates stand well above 94-95% for all the networks, right? And even when it comes to processing these card payments, most of the acquiring banks are able to process them. And I think the success rates of plain card payments and token payments are very much comparable, right? So we are expecting, we are seeing that the industry is become stabilizing slowly, and I think it will improve further.
Yeah, that's rightly said, Siddhesh. I think as the industry, moves towards tokenization, I think the focus will shift on more on reducing the latency and getting higher success rates. And definitely, tokenization will bring in that synergy and better success rates than PAN. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Shantanu. My next question is to you, Siddharth. So, how do you think tokenization is going to benefit merchants across different industries?
Sure, Siddhesh. So I'll give it from a merchant perspective. Of course, you and Shantanu covered it, right, from the product side, right? So we can see, let's imagine that there's a sale going on Nika, right? So they would want the customers to have, the saved credentials feature, the token in this example, right? Or I am sure everyone is following the news of this flood-like situation in Bangalore, right? So imagine that you are taking a cab and you have to search for your card and then enter the card number. Instead, tokenized card would make life much simpler. Similarly, we see see Zomato or Swiggy, right, the food delivery app. I am sure young people such as you would be ordering thrice or 4 times a day, right? So again, you would like to have the simplest checkout and the most seamless and the quickest. So these are few industries. We also work with OTT platforms or the hyperlocals, Zeptos and Dunzos of the world, right? So while the push is from the regulatory bodies, the merchants, but definitely there will be a uptake from the customer side as well, right? Just to have this ease of payment, and also these days all customers are also very knowledgeable, right? So they would also understand this is a more secured way of doing a transaction. And I see that as you guys also mentioned, the numbers actually shooting up with respect to the transactions, the token generated, the token requested, each point along the value chain.
Right. Thanks, Siddharth. I think we had released a poll, so we'll try to share the results of the poll with everyone now. So if you see, the first question was, what is the expiry of a token generated against a customer card? 38% of the participants said it's 30 minutes. 3% said 24 hours. Another 3% said 6 months. And 56%, which is again the majority, said it depends on the card network. So I think the majority is right. The expiry of a token depends a lot on the card network. The token expiry, if you see, it is very similar to the card expiry. Whenever a card is issued by any of the networks and issuing banks, it comes up with a expiry, which is expiry month and expiry year. Similarly, whenever you would provision a token or generate a token through any of these card networks, they would pass on a token expiry associated with it, and it would vary depending on the card. Every time the card token is generated, right? Second question was, is CVV mandatory to process tokenized cards? Majority has said that yes, 63% people had answered yes, 31% had said no, and 6% had said depends on the card network. So here actually the majority is not right, I would say. It actually depends on the card networks. So card networks like RuPay have made it mandatory that even in token transactions, CVV is mandatory to process the token-based transactions. So whenever a customer sees a saved card number displayed on any of the merchant websites, they would also, earlier they used to see a box wherein they had to enter just the 3-digit CVV. So currently, even Cashfree is allowing or accepting CVVs for all the cards that have been saved and displayed to the customers. But as of today, RuPay has made it mandatory to pass the CVV in payments. But networks like Visa and Mastercard do not make it mandatory, and they have left it to issuers. if they would want to do the validation. So technically, it's not a mandatory field as such for processing tokenized card payments. Shantanu, would you like to add here anything? Like what's Mastercard's take on passing CVV?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. So from a network point of view, I would say I would just speak about Mastercard. We have always quoted that CVV is optional. Okay. At the merchant side, I think once your card is tokenized, it makes sense, to enter the token and initiate the transaction rather than requesting the customer to again enter a CVV because his card is already tokenized, right? And that is the more secure way of doing a transaction. But again, it depends upon how the merchant has developed his checkout page, and if he wants to comply with all the networks, then we have given the full freedom to the merchant community to manage the CVV part. But yet it's not mandatory from our side, it's an optional feature.
Got it. Thanks, Shantanu. Third poll question was, is the token visible to the customers or cardholders, right? So 31% said yes and 69% said no. So the answer here is that no, I mean, the token number is not visible to the customers. Again, if you see, when RBI introduced this guideline of card on file tokenization, they did not want to disrupt the way safeguard feature was made available to their customers. RBI knew that offering the safeguard features to the customers meant that there was less friction in making card payments and would also lead to lesser drops when the customer is trying to make payments. So they have tried to keep it intact. What changes is basically the backend flows, which merchants and the payment aggregators, payment processors, and networks have to do a lot of changes. So all these token numbers, token expiry, etc., these are all not exposed to the customers, but these are all parameters that are internally passed through different API integrations that we have with multiple payment processors and entities within the payment industry to facilitate a secure safeguard payments. So there's no need as such to show these token numbers directly to the customers. All right, so now we have almost completed the questions that we had for our panelists. So Siddharth and Shantanu, would you like to add any closing remarks for this session? Then we will move ahead to the Q&A session.
Siddharth, go ahead.
Thanks, Shantanu. So yes, the closing remark is that we are in a very interesting time. We see that from the regulatory perspective, there are new challenges that are being thrown in the open, and all the stakeholders are coming up with requisite systems, processes, and actually implementing it, right? And from a business standpoint, this has been a good move. We see that the adoption is definitely there, and the movement from the erstwhile card safe feature to tokenization has been taken up with enthusiasm, and we see that merchants as well as the customers are adopting the new feature. Shantanu, over to you.
Yeah, I would just like to add, I think you rightly mentioned that tokenization is picking up, and we hope that our entire base, the merchant community, moves the entire base of COF, to token by end of this month, and we get compliant with the the regulatory mandate of tokenization. And we are always there. Cashfree and Mastercard, we're always there to support and clarify any queries which the merchant community has. Yeah, that's my take. Yeah.
Thanks, Shantanu and Siddharth, for sharing your closing remarks. I think we can move forward to the Q&A session. I think I could see a question from Aman Kumar with Shantanu. Would you like to answer how tokenization is going to make the payments more secure?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the word tokenization itself means you're having an alias for your card. So that's one point. So you're using a token instead of your card, which makes your card details more secure. Further, there are additional features which have been added by the networks. So your each transaction, when it is uniquely, one is your token is uniquely generated by a merchant, so the token is tagged to a particular merchant. Second, during any transaction processing, like Siddhesh had given a reference to a cryptogram, the word cryptogram. So each transaction is uniquely secured by the cryptogram and verified by the networks. So even if, by any chance, if there is a tampering of of the transaction, it is restricted to that particular transaction. There are very low chances of tampering a token transaction. Further, it brings ease of business, because you're using a token. You don't have to enter your card number again, your CVV, your expiry, and moreover, the token expiry from the day you're generating a token. The token has expiry. Actually, Mastercard token expiry is after 3 years. So you have a token with you, which is there for 3 years with you. Yeah. Thank you, Siddhesh.
I hope, Aman, it answers your question. Moving on to the second question, which is asked by Mayur. How will refund happen for guest checkout, since data shall get purged after 4 days? I'll answer this question. As a merchant, even Siddharth had mentioned that much of the heavy lifting related to the downstream processes like settlement, refund, reconciliation is supposed to be done by payment aggregators and payment processors, right? So as a merchant, you need not worry about it. What we offer to merchants, or even if you see the existing flows, whenever a merchant has to refund a particular transaction, they can either pass a order ID or a transaction ID, which is a common reference between the merchant and Cashfree. So if they pass that reference ID to us, Cashfree would take care of how to process these refunds or chargebacks, etc. So it's actually not a concern for merchants, and that is something which has to be taken care by payment aggregators and payment processors like Cashfree. Okay. Next question is, what is the topmost challenge that merchants are facing with card on file tokenization? Siddharth or Shantanu, would you like to take this up? The topmost challenges that merchants are facing with card on file token.
So Siddhesh, I'll take it up from a business standpoint, and maybe Shantanu can add from a technical standpoint, right? So the first challenge was, of course, to understand what is the change. How would they have to make changes from a flow perspective? And once these points were cleared from the initial conversations that we had with respective businesses, like I said, there's always a challenge for anyone to adopt a new flow, right? So from a business standpoint, to make them understand that what would be the flow like would be like for them as well as for their end customer. And from a product perspective, I am sure Shantanu would also want to share a few points.
Yeah, I know, Siddharth, you rightly mentioned. I think the topmost challenge for the merchant would be that how they will, tokenize their card. And I think that is where, from a network point of view, there are certain models which are available. If there are merchants who have the technical capability, they can, directly connect with the networks like Mastercard and, get themselves onboarded and tokenize their COF base. Else, they can always reach out to partners like Cashfree, who are on behalf of token requesters, who are connected and certified with Mastercard, and through their pipe, which they are connected to Mastercard, they can tokenize their card on file base. So I think on that side, if merchants have a challenge, I mean, most of the queries are regards to tokenization, but yes, there might be other challenges also as how the downstream activities would be done with regards to clearing and settlement. I think again, it's most of the heavy lifting is done by aggregators like Cashfree. So the merchant community should not worry. I think it's more important that they focus more on their tokenization part, how they will tokenize, and the rest of the activities would be BAU or managed by aggregators.
Got it. Thanks, Siddharth and Shantanu, for covering the challenges faced by merchants. Next question that has been asked is there any specific way or method to create tokens for a card, or the guideline of RBI to tokenize the cards? So I think what he means here is there any algorithm or a process defined to create tokens?
Okay, I can take it. So if you read the regulation says it allows the networks and the issuer only to provide the token service. And right now, in the best interest of interoperability, it would be advised to connect with the networks for the tokenization. The networks have like Mastercard. I'm representing Mastercard, so we have exposed APIs which can be consumed. So there is a process set process. The merchant need to follow that process. They need to be onboard registered. On completing the onboarding process, they would be assigned a unique token requester ID, and also they need to connect to Mastercard using certain APIs. Using these APIs, they can make a call to the Mastercard system and get their card tokenized. And in response to the API, we provide token which can be stored by the merchant community and further used for transaction processing. I hope that answers your query.
Okay, there's another. We'll move on to the next question. Does tokenization also affect the user experience of customers, or is it just for security? Siddharth, would you like to take this up?
Sure. So from the user journey, there is not much change. Of course, for the first time tokenizing, your card, you need to go through a transactional process. So I'm sure you would have seen that whenever you are transacting on any platform, you are being asked that do you want to save your card using the newer regulations, right? So that typically means that from a user perspective, it's a straightforward transaction itself. But yes, few merchants from a perspective of tokenizing cards, I think there were certain cashback programs also rolled out in the market to tokenize cards. But to answer the question, overall, nothing much changed for the end customer. It's only the first time that you want to tokenize your card, you need to go to a transactional flow. Apart from that, the user experience and journey remains the same.
Got it. Thanks, Siddharth. Next question is, can a merchant choose not to implement tokenization to offer safeguard feature, but still be able to accept card payments from the customers?
Okay, if I can take that question. So if you are not, onboarded for COF mandate or COF tokenization, and if you decide to opt out, then the option the merchant has is to, ask the customer to enter the card number every time when he, lands on your checkout page. That's the guest checkout. So that's the only, option. and maybe there are other modes of payment the customer can choose to make. But yes, if he's not supporting or adhering to the RBI regulation, the other option is the merchant can push this details of the customer to guest checkout. So customer will have to enter the card details every time he lands on the merchant page.
Got it. Thanks, Shanti. Yes, I think the merchant. There are merchants who would not be interested in offering the safeguard feature, but then it would mean that their customers suffer. They'll have to enter the card number again and again. So it's always better to integrate with some token requester or token service provider or a payment aggregator and offer the solution. Next question is, does the card on file tokenization mandate, is it applicable only for cards or is it applicable for any other payment modes? So I'll answer this question. So the guideline as such was only for cards. By cards, I mean all kinds of cards. It could be credit card, debit card, corporate credit card, or prepaid card. So any of these cards have to follow this card on file tokenization guideline if those are going to be stored on the server. For the other payment modes like UPI, wallets, or net banking, there are no guidelines as such that have been released yet. So, this guideline is applicable only if the merchant was currently storing the plain 16 card digit numbers on their servers, or was storing any of the card details on their server. All right. I think we have answered most of the questions that have been raised by the audience. For any further questions, they can always drop an email at care@cashfree.com. Right, and we'll try to get those questions answered. Right. If any of the merchants are interested in integrating, they can also reach out to care@cashfree, and we would be happy to help in getting your questions answered. All right. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, Shantanu, for joining.
Thank you, Siddhesh. Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.